On this episode, planting is the hot topic. We discuss the agronomics of picking maturities, population, row spacing, and planting depth importance for soybeans and corn. We talk about why biostimulants are an important component to soybean health and why it's in our seed treatment. Happy planting!
Hi, this is Joe Mershman from Mershman Seeds. Welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 25. Today we have Tommy Johns and Ben Pieper here with us today, and Turk is in southern Illinois, down in the Boot Hill, visiting some of the dealers down there as we start to get ready for 2020. Today we would like to talk about several different things in regard to things that are going on right now and which have the potential to, things that could come up in the next week or two. So I'm going to let Ben start it off.
Well, this week's been kind of a busy week. I mean, we're really starting to see anhydrous roll and planters. Guys are really thinking about planters. We got a little bit of shot of rain here that's going to hold us off. I do want to talk about what is going to be posted on our social media here. If you want to look at what winter kill looks like on alfalfa, I got some really good pictures of heaving and winter kill. So if you have any questions on stuff like that, make sure to get a hold of me or any other of the sales managers for Mershman Seeds. So
well, it sounds like a good alfalfa stand's kind of a rarity this year across the whole Midwest. Just too much water in the soil caused a lot of these plants to get pushed out. And I saw the photos you had, Ben, in their textbook. They could go in a textbook to show what heaving looks like.
Right. So check out our social media platforms if you're concerned on your alfalfa stand for that. So, secondly here, what I'm taking a lot of phone calls on right now is guys are getting prepped and ready to roll. Is it time to plant? How late can we stay in these maturity zones for where we're at on corn? And on the corn side of things, we're really okay. I mean, we're still at 100% maximum yield if we get everything in the ground right around that May 1st or the first week of May time frame for both corn and soybeans for the majority of our region. We're getting a little bit late for maybe our very southern folks, but we're still in good shape for a lot of the things we're looking at.
I know that sometimes farmers, when it gets a little bit later, they say, well, I'll just change my maturity. I'll go from like 110 day to 105. And as I understand it, the only reason that you would change from 110 to 105 is for dry down at harvest.
Correct.
Because corn, even a 110-day plant that's planted later, the plant will try to catch up by just dropping off one set of leaves. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
So the only advantage to go earlier is for dry down. And normally when you go earlier, you have the potential maybe to lose a little bit of yield potential as a general statement.
Right. So when you do go to that earlier stand, you're absolutely correct. All you're doing is looking at dry down. And really, that date doesn't happen for the majority of Iowa and across our latitude. That date doesn't happen until the end of May. So you really have a long. I mean, it's still April. It's mid-April here. We have plenty of time.
Yeah, and as farmers and seed companies, we all have to remember that it's not the weather at planting; it's the weather after planting that determines yield.
Correct.
So, I know on soybeans, it's kind of the opposite. What you do when you have soybeans and it starts to get later. Let's say, for example, you're in Tennessee or the Boot Hill, Missouri, and you decide you were going to plant a 3.6 maturity soybean, which is very early. It'd be like planting a Group 2 in the West Point latitude or a Mid 2. What do you do when it starts to get late, in your opinion? Well, what you do is with soybeans is you plant a higher population and narrow your rows down. When you plant in 7-inch drill to 15-inch rows today, that's like planting 2 weeks earlier in 30-inch rows. So you can pick up some of the lost yield potential with an early bean planted late by narrowing your rows down. In other words, you can pick up same thing planting in 7-inch rows today or 15-inch rows. Anything that's in that narrow row spacing, it's like planting 2 weeks earlier in wide rows because you're going to canopy those rows faster. And basically when it comes to plants, you're trying to collect as much sunlight as possible and convert it into yield. The other thing you do is increase your planting rate, because soybeans are short day plants, and they tend to start reproduction right after the longest day of the year, right, Ben?
Right.
So basically, the earlier you plant, you would want to stay with, for example, a full season. But if as it gets later and you want to plant early season soybean, then you would narrow down, increase your population. Again, we're not to that point yet, but I know that we have some customers in Tennessee and also in Boot Hill, Missouri, that like to plant the 3/6s so they can get that combine out early and get across those acres. And they've been yielding quite well for them. The thing to do is, as we see as it get into May, if you're still going to stay with that maturity, narrow down, increase your population.
Because what you're doing is you're increasing your nodes, essentially. You're increasing, when you increase that population, you're increasing the amount of nodes and the amount of buds that are going to eventually create beans. So you are absolutely correct. That is the right way to go.
Well, let's talk about planting depth, okay, on corn. That's a pretty critical thing. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
I was going to ask that same thing, Ben. So I know you want to try to go for what, 2 inches for corn?
I like a heavy 2 rather than
Okay.
a light 2.
What happens? So if you're having dealing with some cooler temperatures, would you say to shallow that up a little bit?
I would 2 inches is my minimum.
Minimum, okay.
For what I'd like to see.
Why
because
is
there's
it, Ben?
because there's so many more important things other than temperature for getting that corn plant out of the ground. I really like 2.5 because if we shy towards the deeper side of corn planting rather than the shallower side, you have two basic sets of nodes. You have your nodal roots and your seminal roots, and your nodal roots are what is it's going to grab the majority of the moisture, and your seminal roots are the ones that are going to travel further down.
Get the moisture.
Right. So what happens when that corn plant doesn't get planted deep enough, that root line, your set of nodal roots are going to be at the very surface of the soil, and you're not going to have the moisture that you need if we get into a period of drought stress, inevitably, that we do every year. We always see a period of drought stress where that corn really has to dig down and find as much moisture as possible. A corn plant has the ability to funnel 1/10 of an inch of rain acts like a 1/2 inch of rain to a corn plant, because that when a corn plant gets any decent size, it has the ability to funnel that 1/10 of an inch, and it drops all of that water at the very base of the plant. So, root structure and root spacing and planting depth, that is all extremely critical when we're looking at key times of the corn plant's life, when you have to have as much water as possible for the least amount of stress.
Okay, Ben, so if you're going out and you need to check your depth, how do you check your depth? What's the proper way to do it?
Well, there's the first thing that you always do, and it's a problem especially when we have guys that have conventional tillage. The first thing that you do is you always firm up the seed bed. And some people are worried by walking across the top of that seed bed, you're actually compressing that dirt too much. But in my opinion, by the time you get all the rain and the weathering that's going to happen to that dirt, that's going to be the same level, because all the pore space is going to eventually collapse as you get rain on.
So you step on the row.
Yep, you step on the row first and you get it patted down, and then you basically go through with your pocket knife and you slowly dig through the dirt to find your root, and you're gentle with it, and you're always measuring to the top of that plant, because that's where you're going to start. Your radical's going to go down and your mesocotyl's going to come up, and that's your depth right there.
On some of your calls that you've been out on trying to figure out what's going on, how many times have you seen planting depth come into play a factor in what you're trying to diagnose?
Way more than not.
Yeah.
Planting, the planters that when we have to go out and look at diagnostic issues, more times than not, the corn plant is not planted at the correct depth. It's always shallower than it needs to be.
So one time more for our listeners, where do you recommend corn being planted at, and where do you recommend soybeans depth being planted at?
2.5 inches deep, because that 2.5 inches deep on your corn plant, that gets your first set of nodal roots,
Good.
3/4 of an inch to an inch down in the ground, and that's going to be where the majority of the moisture is going to be taken in at. So 2.5 to a little bit heavier than that doesn't bother me at all with corn plant. Don't go any deeper than 3 inches, because that's when that corn plant really has to push to get to the top, and that's where you start to see uneven emergence. On soybeans, 1 inch in the ground to 1.25 inches. You can actually kind of fluctuate with soybeans. You can kind of fluctuate depth a little bit more.
It's critical to have the moisture.
Yep.
Because I've seen in years where when it starts to get drying out, that you get some in dry dirt and some in moisture, and then you can have some potential problems with emergence in that situation.
Yep. So you get your pocket knife out again, and you dig and you find your soil moisture line, and you want to put that soybean, 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch below your soil moisture line, so that it's going to be there for the next 3 or 4 days until that bean plant has enough moisture. It's imbibed enough moisture to germ out. So
Joe, I've seen some people where they have some issues, where they have some spotty soybeans emerging, or it's just maybe not at the correct population where they want, or maybe even the rows are a little wider just to do a planter malfunction. How much would you say soybeans compensate in those rows to still have effective yield?
Well, Tommy, may find this hard to believe, but there was a Crops and Soil magazine that was put out in the early 80s, and that's still our number one guide, and it's using a lot of data that Purdue did back then. And we'll post that link, but it tells you that a majority of the cases, it does not pay to replant soybeans. And that's even if you got skips, 1 foot skips, 25% of the field, and one foot skips. The bottom line is a soybean can compensate 18 inches in any direction, but you have to have weed control. And like we said many times in many episodes, sunshine is never wasted. In other words, there's going to be a weed grow there if there's not a soybean plant. So the critical issue is weed control. And with the Enlist E3 soybeans and LibertyLink GT27 soybeans that we have now, with a good residual program and the post programs, weed control is very, very manageable now. So you can have thinner stands, and that's why farmers in general are planting these technologies with a high quality seed treatment such as Bonus Coated Plus with Pearl Coat Plus. They can plant less. So the data on that Crops and Soil magazine back then said 40,000 is where you would consider replanting. And I don't know a farmer anywhere around here that would let a stand at 40,000. But realistically, that's what they published back then. A lot of farmers and a lot of other universities are saying somewhere in that 70,000 is really realistically. But I can tell you, we've done planting studies, and 40,000 has topped our studies in certain years, particularly dry years. So the bottom line is it kind of depends upon your soil types. If you've got really good heavy soils, those plants are going to get very tall, robust, and they're going to fill in. If you've got some lighter soils, tend to be a little bit more droughty, then that's probably not enough population. You may have to plant actually a little bit more in those situations because your plants are going to be shorter, not going to be able to fill the row as well. Planting and interplanting can be a way to thicken up a stand, but many times it's very hard to do. I mean, realistically. So I always encourage farmers, I said, let's learn something. Leave a section of the field where you don't touch it. And if you go ahead and replant, go ahead and replant on that. The other thing, Tommy, is if you're planting Mershman soybeans, be patient. Yeah. And the reason why is because our seed treatment will last 20 to 25 days. Some of the companies out there put on low levels, not very robust rates. Their seed treatment will only last about 7 to 10 days. So what happens is, they see the neighbor replanting, and they say, well, I need to replant. But you go dig your soybeans up, and if they're not rotting, if they're still pushing, and if they're still growing, give them a chance. Yeah. Give them a chance. And that's why at Mershman Seeds, we will send an individual, our area sales manager, or our dealer out to your field to look at your fields, help you evaluate your stands. And I always tell farmers this, it is very easy for us to tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because it's not our money. But the reality of it is a very tough emotional decision. So sometimes you have to rely on somebody that's just looking at it objectively and saying, and mathematically. And that's where the service that Mershman Seeds has. We will come to your field, even if you just buy one bag and you have a problem with it, we will send somebody out to look at that field. And that's part of what we sell when you buy a bag of Mershman Seeds.
You bring that up, that's a good point. I really wish, when we were out here, I wish farmers would really ask the question of what is getting put on my seed for seed treatment. Because that's everything we've seen. I would say, Joe, ask you a question is, how would you rate seed treatments in the seed buying experience for soybeans?
Well, there's basically 3 different levels of seed treatment, in my opinion. The first level is a basic fungicide. Yeah. They're very inexpensive. I mean, they can be purchased for under $1. And then when you put the insecticide in, then it starts getting more expensive. The gaucho type products that are controlling the overwintering population of bean leaf beetles, as well as some of the underground insects such as wireworms and grape collapsus and some of the other insects that eat on the seed prior to germination. Okay. I really think that's a critical element. In other words, you should never go to the field with a fungicide only. You need the insecticide also. Then there's the level that we operate at, where we use a robust rate of multiple fungicides. We put the insecticide, and then on top of it, we put a biostimulant. And biostimulants are like the latest and greatest thing when it comes to helping soybeans. And what it is a combination of products. In our case, we're using Turpidity from Rosen's, and it's a product that is extremely helpful when soybeans are under stress. And because it has nutrients around it, it has amino acids, and it has plant hormones. So basically, things that will help that plant shore up these stresses and encourage it to get up. And then when it does come up, you have a very uniform emergence. And they're finding in soybeans, just like corn, uniform emergence is important. That is a very, very expensive item that we put on our seed treatment. In addition to that, then we also, obviously we put a colorant. We also use a polymer. Polymers are strictly to glue that seed treatment on the seed. And then the last thing we do is we put a seed finisher. Again, another step that's not normally taken out there in the industry. And the seed finisher makes the seed look really bright and shiny. Well, we really don't care how pretty the seed looks because, well, we're going to put it in the dirt, right? But we do care about how it flows through the planter. Right. I will not put anything on the seed that doesn't help the farmer. If it's just an appearance thing, we could care less. We want something that will benefit the farmer if we're going to spend the money. So we put all of this together and we buy it in large quantities and we sell it basically at cost to the dealers and our farmers.
Would you, if you had to put a number on it, maybe a variance of what our seed treatment maybe adds the potential for yield?
Oh, the biostimulant alone, those three components in that biostimulant, it's 3 bushel more than a fungicide insecticide package. Wow. That's just the biostimulant piece. Then if you compare the fungicide insecticide piece to non-treated, there's a potential another 2 to 3 bushel. So again, it depends on how much stress you have. And again, the critical thing on planting is not to plant right before that wet, cold rain, which is the first drink of water that soybean takes in. That's when you have problems. So watch your forecasts. Try to avoid those huge downpours that are going to occur within 24 to 72 hours. If you get a window like that, then you're off to the races. Right. But there is differences in seed treatments. And I know I hear a lot of farmers, yeah, I got treated seed, and then you ask them, what did you get? You might have paid $5, $10, $15 for a $1 or $2 or $3 seed treatment.
And that's interesting too, is if you just have maybe just a $1 or $2 seed treatment, like you said, with just a basic fungicide, and then you're getting this package for us with a 6 bushel advantage.
Right.
I mean, that's, Ben, you're out in the field all the time. How do you see the customers react to some of our seed treatments or the advantage they get with Turpidity over some of the other competitors?
There's definite advantage there. We had very, very nice looking stands last year of soybeans that came out of the ground. Well, what I would like to add is that the even stand is definitely a key, and that's a difference to me that's a different portion of the seed treatment than just the standard fungicide insecticide. Because what the fungicide and insecticide are is an assurance policy, because you have to have the stress there. Inevitably every year we have some sort of stress there, but the higher rates are really protecting us for the higher amounts of stress, and that's when you're going to see Merschmann's seed treatment shine, because with the biostimulant and the high rates of the fungicides that we're running on, is our seed is designed to handle extremely wet, extremely cool, extremely warm for certain fungicides. I mean, we're protected against everything that could be out there, because at the end of the day, we're trying to minimize the variables that the farmers have to deal with out in their field, because if you throw the full package out, our insurance policy is we're going to cover you no matter what.
Right. And the other thing that you can add to our seed treatment is Levo. And if you're an early planter in high yield environments, if you got a field that's got sudden death, or Levo can really make a difference. And hopefully a year from now we'll have another product come into the marketplace called Saltro from Syngenta, which some of the data that they're showing is maybe a 2 or 3 bushel advantage over a Levo. So obviously we're watching that one real close too. So when do you add a Levo? A Levo is on fields that tend to be very heavy, tend to be have a problem with sudden death, and if you're planting in soil temperatures around that 60 degree or lower, because that's when sudden death infection occurs. So last year in May, if you remember, the only day it was normal temperature in May was May 1st. The rest of May it was above normal temperature. So we didn't see a lot of problems with sudden death last year. And that's because temperatures were much above 60 degrees at planting time for the most part, so really didn't see much problem. So if you're an early planter, Levo may be a benefit to you when your soil temperatures are at that low 60 degree mark.
And soil moisture plays a huge portion of that as well. So if you have
Exactly.
poorly drained soils as well, because last year we had warm temperatures, plus we had just
Saturated
ideal.
soils.
Well, no, at the beginning we had ideal
right.
ideal conditions going in the ground. That's why we didn't see as much. This year we're at saturation level. We're at cool soil temps. This would be my year. I mean, this would be the pick that I would have to have the Levo on.
Particularly if you got that field has a history of sudden death on it. So you just got to be careful about that. But we're very fortunate to have these seed treatments that we can work through some of these problems. But I don't know of anything else we can put on our seed to make our seed better that we're putting on right now.
Just put a tagline on there that says "Just add water, Joe."
Just not too much though.
So
Anything else?
well, that's all I have. Busy week ahead. I did want to say I think soil moisture or soil temp around here is around 52.
It's
53?
been fluctuating.
Yep.
It kind of depends on where you
the
stick your soil monitor in. but
Upper
we're in-
40s, lower 50s.
Yep.
Okay.
Locally, farmers have been hammered down on getting fertilizer on the
On
fields,
hydrous
getting ready to plant. I do know of one soybean field that was planted this past week in the West Point area, and well drained, tiled field, good soil, worked up well. So
Enlist soybeans, right?
they were enlist soybeans.
Nice.
So and they were treated with Levo and bonus coated plus with Pearl Coat plus. So farmer came in and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, if your ground's fit, we have temperatures supposed to be in the 70s and almost 80 this week, which we did have. Go for it." And we did get a little rain last night, but it was like only 3/10, so you should be off to the races.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Ben, and that concludes another episode of Cup of Joe. We'll see you next week, and thank you again for your business. And don't hesitate to ever contact us if you have any questions. Take care.
Hope everybody has a good Easter.